Sophie adjusted her son Daniel's little jacket as they entered the softly lit café. Her heart pounded in her chest, not because it was her first date in years, but because she had no choice but to bring her 5-year-old with her. The babysitter had cancelled last minute, and cancelling the date altogether felt like a door slamming on the faintest glimmer of hope she'd allowed herself in months. Life as a single mom had been a relentless storm, balancing work, bills, and Daniel's needs left her drained but determined. Tonight, though, was different. It wasn't just dinner. It was a chance, maybe, for someone to see her beyond the tired eyes and hurried schedule. Yet, as she spotted the man waiting at the corner table, impeccably dressed with a calm presence, Sophie felt the weight of embarrassment pressing down. This was a blind date, arranged by a friend, and she had shown up not alone but with a child. Daniel clutched her hand, his big curious eyes darting around the café, unaware of the anxiety twisting in his mother's stomach. Taking a deep breath, Sophie approached, introduced herself, and immediately blurted out an apology. "I'm so sorry," she said nervously, "I couldn't find anyone to watch him, and I understand if this makes tonight impossible." She waited for the disappointment, the polite excuse, the awkward shuffle out of her life before it even began. Instead, the man simply looked at her, then at Daniel, and smiled warmly. It was not a forced smile, not one laced with judgment, but a genuine curve of kindness that seemed to say, "You're not a burden here." The man across the table extended his hand, his eyes soft with sincerity. "I'm Ethan," he said, his tone gentle, almost disarming. Daniel peeked out from behind Sophie's arm, clutching a crayon he had pulled from his pocket, as though it were his shield in a new world. Sophie, still flustered, guided her son into the chair beside her and tried to form an explanation, but Ethan raised a hand and shook his head. "You don't owe me an apology," he assured her. "Life doesn't always wait until the perfect babysitter is available." The words carried no hint of frustration, only a quiet understanding that instantly loosened the knot in Sophie's chest. Daniel, sensing the warmth in Ethan's demeanor, relaxed and began to scribble on the paper menu in front of him. Sophie found herself caught off guard, not just by Ethan's acceptance, but by the way he seemed to embrace Daniel's presence as if it belonged to the evening itself. The waiter arrived, and without hesitation, Ethan asked Daniel what he wanted to eat. It wasn't performative or patronizing, just natural, as though inviting a child to the table was the most obvious thing in the world. Sophie's throat tightened as she realized how rare this simple kindness was. Most people viewed her motherhood as an obstacle, something inconvenient or heavy to carry into relationships. But Ethan's eyes carried no such burden. They reflected patience, curiosity, and something deeper, respect. Sophie had walked into the café braced for rejection, yet here she was, sitting across from a man who had turned her greatest fear into an unexpected gift, acceptance without conditions. As the evening unfolded, Sophie found herself slowly lowering the walls she had carried for so long. Conversation flowed more easily than she expected, though she remained hyper-aware of Daniel's occasional interruptions. He would tug on her sleeve to show her a crooked drawing of a house, or ask loudly why the soup was taking so long. Each time, Sophie's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but Ethan never flinched. He leaned in to admire Daniel's drawings, nodded thoughtfully at his endless questions, and even joked with him about starting a detective agency together to investigate mystery soups. For the first time in years, Sophie didn't feel like she was apologizing for her life, she was simply living it. Yet beneath her laughter, an ache lingered. She couldn't ignore the reality that this was only one evening. Men like Ethan, dressed in tailored suits and speaking with the quiet confidence of success, did not usually stay in the orbit of women like her, women who worked double shifts, who juggled overdue bills, who patched old shoes instead of buying new ones. Still, there was something grounding in his presence, something that whispered she deserved to be seen. At one point, Sophie caught herself staring at Ethan while Daniel animatedly recounted his pirate adventure at school. Ethan listened intently, utterly focused, as though the boy's story was the most important thing in the room. Sophie blinked back tears, realizing she couldn't remember the last time someone had made them both feel this significant. The night that had begun with her deepest apology was transforming into a rare moment of belonging, a fragile but powerful reminder that kindness could reshape the weight of an entire evening. Just when Sophie thought the evening couldn't surprise her further, Ethan leaned back in his chair and asked Daniel what he wanted to be when he grew up. The boy's eyes lit up, his voice bubbling with excitement. "An astronaut. I want to fly to the moon and see the stars up close," he exclaimed, his arms flailing in wide arcs to emphasize the vastness of space. Sophie chuckled nervously, ready to apologize again for her son's boundless energy, but Ethan's expression stopped her. He wasn't pretending to listen, he was captivated. "An astronaut?" Ethan repeated with admiration. "That's the bravest dream I've ever heard. Do you know astronauts need a strong team to help them reach the stars? I think you'd be perfect for that." Daniel beamed, his cheeks glowing red as he buried his face in his drawing, shy but thrilled by the encouragement. Sophie's heart tightened, emotions welling up unexpectedly. How long had it been since someone besides her had nurtured Daniel's imagination, treated his dreams as more than childish chatter? For years, she had carried the weight of being both mother and father, cheerleader and protector. Tonight, in a cozy café, a stranger had shared that load, if only for a moment. It felt like sunlight cracking through a sky she had convinced herself would always remain gray. Ethan glanced back at Sophie, his gaze steady and unhurried. "You've done an incredible job with him," he said quietly. The words hit her like a tide, rushing past every defense she had built, leaving her breathless. Compliments rarely came her way, and when they did, they felt empty. But this felt like truth, and it was almost too much to hold. The warmth of his words lingered with Sophie long after the plates arrived. She tried to focus on the meal, but her mind kept circling back to the unexpected gentleness Ethan had shown. Somewhere between bites of pasta and Daniel's chatter about rocket ships, Sophie found herself asking him about his own life. His answer surprised her. Ethan wasn't just a man in a suit, he was the CEO of a growing tech company, someone who carried the weight of hundreds of employees depending on him. Yet, instead of boasting, he spoke with humility, sharing stories of sleepless nights, difficult decisions, and the loneliness that came with success. Sophie listened intently, realizing that while their struggles looked different on the surface, both of them had walked through storms in their own way. For a moment, it didn't feel like a struggling mom and a powerful CEO sitting across from each other. It felt like two souls quietly recognizing each other's battles and choosing compassion over judgment. Daniel, oblivious to the deeper current flowing between the adults, giggled over his bowl of spaghetti, leaving little sauce stains on his cheeks. Ethan laughed along, grabbing a napkin and gently offering it, as though wiping away a child's mess was the most natural act in the world. Sophie's eyes stung, not from embarrassment this time, but from the sharp contrast between what she had feared and what she was experiencing. She had expected distance, dismissal, maybe even pity. Instead, she was receiving kindness that didn't make her feel small, it made her feel human again, as though her story and her son's dreams mattered just as much as anyone else's. As the evening drew to a close, Sophie braced herself for the inevitable goodbye. She gathered Daniel's crayons and tucked his little jacket over his shoulders, preparing her heart for disappointment. Surely this was where reality would step in, reminding her that magical nights didn't belong to women like her. But before she could speak, Ethan rose and helped Daniel with his chair, then turned to her with that same steady kindness he had carried all night. "You apologized at the start," he said softly, "but you don't ever need to. You walked in tonight carrying the most important part of your world with you. That doesn't make you less, it makes you more." His words cracked something open inside Sophie, a release she hadn't allowed herself in years. Tears slipped silently down her cheeks as Daniel clutched her hand, confused but safe. Ethan didn't look away, he simply offered a napkin and a smile that didn't demand anything in return. "If you're open to it," he added, "I'd like to see you both again. Maybe a park next time. I hear astronauts need plenty of room to train for space." Daniel's face lit up like the stars he dreamed of, and Sophie, overwhelmed, could only nod. In that moment, she realized kindness wasn't about grand gestures, it was about being seen, holy and without judgment. Walking out of the cafe into the cool night air, Sophie felt something she hadn't in a long time: hope. Not just for love, but for a future where compassion still had the power to transform weary hearts. And as Ethan walked beside them, she knew this night wasn't the end of a story. It was the beautiful beginning.